Hello, my name's Tom Cahill. The reason I'm making this video today is to highlight a very interesting situation which I've watched happen, and I think it's in the public interest that this information be shared, and you can draw your own conclusions from it, because I know what's going on. Let's see by the end of what I've said if you worked it out as well. So my name's Tom Cahill. You can get me on tomcahill@hotmail.com, but with a 0 instead of an O in Tom, or my Skype address is T0MCAHILL, so it's Tom Cahill, again, just like my Hotmail address, but that's my Skype email as well, my Skype address, so you can get me on that as well. So it's T0MCAHILL@hotmail.com, or leave that at hotmail.com, and that's my Skype name. I'm 32 years old. I'm a qualified quantity surveyor. I've also got various other qualifications, but suffice it to say, as a victim of the Aston Ponzi scheme, or ALPonz, I've become expert in various different things in my pursuit of getting my money back. Some of these things I knew from day one, so it's not that I've learnt. A lot of this stuff's just common sense and understanding that you're being lied to, but and some of it's, work experience. If you work in a contentious job where you're dealing with lots of vermin constantly, or constantly lying and trying to cheat everybody and got no morals, you do get used to spotting them, and you do obviously know not to trust somebody just because they're wearing a shiny suit and they don't say fuck, wank or bollocks. You realise they still might be lying to you. In fact, they probably are, because they didn't learn to speak like that when they were born. They sort of picked it up. They just get better at conning people, and then they just pick up a posh accent. Anyway, there's this company who it seems took on some of the outgoing Ponzi scheme operators who were dealing with the tail end of the Ponzi scheme. If you see some of my other videos, I'll explain ALPonz, which still continues to trade under the noses of the police with their full approval. City of London police, that is. One of the things that they do to cover the end of their crime is they put the nouveau Ponzi scheme, which is like a normal Ponzi scheme, but you don't actually pay any dividends out. You just trick people into thinking they've actually got something they haven't got. So it's a spin on the traditional Ponzi scheme model, where you have to pay out some good dividends to some people. What they do is they put in place a bogus insolvency procedure on at the end with bent insolvency practitioners to trick people into thinking that it's out of their hands and there's nothing they can do about it. Therefore, it kind of like relinquishes certain aspects of responsibility which would not otherwise be able to be got rid of. Now, they can't really be got rid of, but you see, the in-house insolvency procedures practitioners who know the orchestrators of the fraud see to it that things go missing, timescales run out. You get the picture. Anyway, two of the people who were working for RE10, who are based in Albemarle Street, and now they've got offices all over the country, again, because even though loads of people know they're criminals, I've had lots of people phoning me up telling me other frauds they've done. The police are 100% behind them, and they've obviously got police protection, so they're flourishing in this country now. They've even got offices in India. They're contracting their work out all over the place. They're totally protected by the establishment. But anyway, two of their members of staff, also partners, who were there to start off with, allegedly one of them actually started the company. They've now moved to another company probably 2 years ago. Now, these two people's names, these two scoundrels named, are Finbarr O'Connell, that's Finbarr Finbarr O'Connell, and Adam Stephens spelt PH, not V. Yeah. So both of these two scumbags, both qualified accountants and both fraud experts, right? Yeah, they're experts in fraud, and these people, as you'll start to learn, spend most of the time doing frauds, just like people who've had time in the fraud squad then go on to manage companies to do frauds. It's the way it works. Or people who deal with cyber crimes, no doubt, in the police, will then go and start hacking into people's computer systems. It's the way it works. You go in the police, or you work for the serious fraud office, then you go and do crimes, and they won't go near you because you used to work for them, and it's awkward, and also you won't get a good job at that bent company when you retire at the police age 45 if you've obviously shut the company down because they're a load of criminals. This is how it works. But anyway, the amusing thing about Smith Williamson, which is the firm that they've gone to, is that that has a guy there working there called David Alexander. Now, David Alexander is a pleasant enough chap if you speak to him, which is actually quite surprising because a lot of these people, if you confront them with the fact they've got some kind of criminal association, however polite you are, they become extremely aggressive and basically start trying to make out you're harassing them, even if you just ask them a question like, did you know this, or are you aware of this thing, or would you like to speak to me about this? He doesn't do that, so like, you have to give him some credit for that. He's got a bit of sense. But anyway, if you read here, right, if you believe this completely non-Masonic sounding job title, what he is the president of the UK chapter of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. He is also a Regent Emeritus of the organisation. What the fuck? Yeah, so he's basically the Grand Wizard of fraud examiners in the whole world, but he's the UK Grand Wizard or whatever. Anyway, right, this is this guy's little bio that he's got on the Smith Williamson's website, because he's their head of fraud. Right, it says David works in our London and Birmingham offices. He has specialised in fraud investigation and forensic accounting since 1991 and has a particular expertise in fraud and financial investigations, anti-bribery and corruption, regulatory investigations, asset tracking, fraud risk management, commercial disputes. David has carried out over 200 investigations involving false accounting, procurement fraud, theft, allegations of impropriety, banking and treasury fraud. It's not actually written that well. This has led him to give evidence in both civil and criminal trials. Many of these investigations have involved international locations including Europe, America and the Caribbean. David is a Regent Emeritus of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners and is a past president of the UK chapter. He regularly lectures at conferences to firms, solicitors and regulators on fraud investigation and asset tracking, as well as advertising clients on fraud risk management management solutions. He has been interviewed on TV, radio and quoted in the national and professional press. Right, so this is David Alexander, lots of experience in fraud. So what's he doing? Taking on Finbarr O'Connell and Adam Stephens. Both of those two are fraudsters. They were administering a Ponzi scheme. He's taken them on. I've told him, and the date that I told him was, well, I don't know, it was sometime around the 27th of April of this year, which is 2013, because I told him I'd publish it if he didn't get rid of them by the end of the week, because I said, or at least suspend them, because, they're partners working there. They wouldn't be employees. I think they'll be contractors, for tax reasons, I reckon. But anyway, he didn't want to get rid of them. Now, in case you've got any doubt that they are criminals and they were acting criminally, I'm not going to go into it on this particular video, but Aston Lloyd and Holdings PLC continues to trade as far as I know. But these two shysters were part of a sort of basically a four-man team. There might have been other people involved, including Nimish Patel and Bijal Shah. And they, Bijal, in front of 200 people, admitted that Colville Burke, who was the person who owned Aston Lloyd Holdings PLC for most of the time, he then sort of let other people take over and he stepped down. He knew these people, and they Bijal in front of the general creditors meeting, as they called it. We weren't creditors, but it was the best we were going to get when they told us the company was going into liquidation and we had shares and we weren't going to get our stuff that we bought in full. When we went to this meeting, he said that he'd met him at a social function. So you've got Colville Burke meeting Bijal Shah and Nimish Patel at a social function. I pictured a wedding because they're all Indians of various types, but that's what I pictured. But I know he didn't say a wedding. I remember he said a social function, because I remember thinking, You know, when you try and log something in your head and think that's extremely suspicious, but don't get carried away and remember it as a wedding, because lots of people remember it as a wedding, but it wasn't a wedding, it was just a social function. Probably was a wedding though. Well, it's probably a made up story because he knew him anyway. Later on, which is now in writing, he then said that he met him at a creditors committee and he was a creditor, so he changed the story completely and he's put it in writing. And you know, so there's about 200 witnesses to him saying one thing, and then there's witnesses, you know, of his own written word saying the complete opposite. So the fact is, they knew the people who they went into when they went into a voluntary liquidation. They weren't put in by a creditor, like a large creditor, like a bank didn't put them into liquidation or administration. They put themselves into administration. Now, administration and liquidation are two insolvency procedures, both of which are used for various different reasons. The legitimate reason for an administration would be when you can recover the company. Now, if you're saying that all the things that the company has are assets, but you've already actually sold them to various people, why on earth would it go into administration? Because surely the stuff that you haven't finished, if you've got no money, there's no possible way it can get finished. And if you don't spend any time trying to get other companies to buy the company or anything like that, because of course all the money's gone because the people have stolen it, how on earth could it possibly go into any insolvency procedure at all? Obviously it couldn't. And the whole point is, when you take on an insolvency procedure, you take on a commercial risk now, because you've got to sort of finish doing it if you take it on. So why on earth would you take on an insolvency procedure for a company where all the money's been stolen and all the assets are fully owned by the people who paid for them? It doesn't make any sense. Of course it does make sense when you realise that if you put it into a bullshit administration, you can spin it out as though you're trying to recover the company, but you're not really trying to recover the company at all, because there's absolutely no way of doing it, because the company effectively doesn't exist. It's just a crime vehicle and a money laundering conduit. So what they were doing is, in that time, they had like creditors committee meetings and all this type of stuff. People weren't creditors, because a creditor would be somebody who's got shares. There were no shares, so they weren't creditors. They were equitable interest holders. Now, they even got a barrister's opinion. I forget, Michael Jeffries, his name is. And they kept this from everybody. And that said, they're definitely not investors because they own the stuff, which I said from day one, and I've written it from day one. Basically, it's not complicated stuff. He also said any cross-jurisdictional matters were irrelevant because everything had been agreed in England, which I'd said from day one. All of these things I said from day one. It's not particularly complicated, but of course, because he's a barrister, and everyone said it must be right. And of course, I was just a lucky guess. Like, it's not because it's obvious. That, you know, like the obvious answer never actually really pleases anybody, because they always, I don't know what it is. They're just two bullshit baffles brains anyway. The point is, this David Alexander, there's no possible way he can't know that Finbarr O'Connell and Adam Stephens are criminals, because he's an expert in fraud, and I do believe he is, and he knows that's what they are. Now, if you look on Smith Williamson's website now, Adam Stephens, right, of Smith Williamson, has been now promoted. Right, he's been promoted. He's been promoted to something to do with fraud. Now, before, I don't believe this was the case. Now it says, yeah, look, Adam is a chartered accountant and a licensed insolvency practitioner. He has worked in restructuring, insolvency and turnaround for over 10 years and has taken appointments since 2010. I don't really know what that means, taking appointments. He has specialised in, amongst other things, complex and sometimes international insolvencies, right? International, cross-jurisdictional, but they're making that really complicated, but he's apparently done it lots of times. Sometimes international insolvencies involving asset tracing, and in the pensions arena, employer covenant reviews, probably ripping people's pensions off on behalf of firms and then folding the company. That's what that will be, I bet. Anyway, so he's actually saying that he has dealt with all this type of stuff in the past, and he deals with asset tracing. He didn't do any of that when he was apparently taking money in for a so-called fighting fund to do all this stuff. They never did anything like that. They never traced anything, apart from saying, oh, that guy's like bank account, we can see that like some money's gone into that guy's bank account. And there was another guy called Robert Wing. Now this Robert Wing was a marketing director at Aston Lloyd, and they gave him a 300 grand payout, and they said, yeah, he's got a 300 grand payout. Now this Robert Wing hasn't even moved from central London. Like, he didn't go off to work in Australia or South Africa for a bit, or Spain, Marbella. He didn't even do that. He's been working in the city ever since, and he's even been bragging on his LinkedIn profile that he was doing the marketing for Aston Lloyd, even when it broke that it was a fraud. He was still boasting about it. Now, I have brought this up with his company, and they did say they did take it very seriously, they said, but they continued to keep him on. And when I put the article up on Scam Exposure, Scam Informer, and there's a picture of him on a deck chair with like his tits out and a hat on. Now he's got a picture with his tits, in a shirt and tie, and it's black and white. He looks a lot more professional, and he hasn't got a little hat. But at the end of the day, they've kept him on. Now this is the point: why is Smith Williamson employing somebody who's the head of fraud, who's taking on fraudsters? It's obvious they've been doing fraud. He's not interested. He just doesn't care. He's just going to take them on anyway. This guy, quite polite, quite friendly, quite nice to speak to him. But when he speaks to me, he says very odd things, like he said, oh, please don't speak to anyone else in my company about this, because the other day you phoned up and I wasn't here, and you phoned me up and you sort of started talking to them about it. It's just like, well, why not? Like, if you want to keep it between me and him, you'd think he's going to have to give you something to, what's in it for me, not to tell anyone. It's all very, very, very weird. And the day that I went to the winding up petition for Aston Lloyd, I actually was just walking down the street on the way back, because I went to visit Paul Kirk at the City of London Police just for a sort of fly-by visit, unannounced. Managed to get him down. He was his normal, arrogant, nonchalant police, like, oh, I'm too important. Turns out he wasn't. He was just waiting to get the train to go up to Manchester for a course. So he came down and he was wearing like mufti day clothes. And I did talk to him, but on the way back I saw the Smith Williamson sign up. Now, I wasn't familiar with this company, but I only obviously knew about it since this Aston Lloyd thing broke. And I just went in and sort of went down to reception, just waited for a bit to see if I could get him to come down. The people were very helpful, and he didn't come down, but I knew he was there. I reckon he was there, but he just didn't want to come down, because these people, they don't like being confronted by people who know what they're up to. So anyway, Smith Williamson, why on earth are they employing Adam Stephens Finbarr O'Connell? Why is David Alexander employing these two people, even though they've been managing a Ponzi scheme? And in Finbarr O'Connell's case, I've had people phoning me up and telling me all sorts of things about all sorts of other crimes he's been involved with. He seems to act with impunity in crime, I believe, because he's got police protection. Hopefully, you'll start to see the pattern. If you didn't get the gist of why it's a crime because it's linked to the Aston Lloyd Ponzi scheme, watch the other videos related to this, and then you'll see I can't keep going on about the same thing each time I explain. The point is, they came in, they took on a bogus insolvency procedure. There's no possible way there should have been even a liquidation, because there was no money in the firm. It had all been stolen. And the other thing is, it was a subsidiary, and the money had been going from that subsidiary into other parts of the firm, the wider firm, but that wasn't put into the insolvency procedure. So they should have insisted that the whole thing was put into an insolvency procedure. But instead, as a money laundering conduit, they wanted to keep the other parts trading, so that then that money could be stolen, a lot of which went to a company called Insight Property Group, which is in South Africa, and that's been now closed down. Lots of the scumbags who've been working for Aston Lloyd or Obelisk, who was the sales agents, they moved over and they were then working for those companies. Interestingly enough, Robert Wing's company, one of the people who I've looked at on LinkedIn was working there, had previously been working for Insight Group. So you see, there's quite a lot of crossover with these companies. They all kind of work together. They all sort of piss in the same pot. I've been told about it before, but you see, when you look into it, you start finding it's the case. Again, all totally happy to do crime constantly, because they've all been grassed up to the police 1,000 times, and the police do absolutely nothing because they're being protected by the police. So you've got Smith Williamson happy to employ fraudsters who, spent 18 months or a year working for a company just doing outright criminal activity. They're well aware of what they're up to. And in Adam Stephens' case, I've never actually met Finbarr O'Connell. I've seen him, but I've never actually met him and spoken to him. But in the case of Adam Stephens, I did tell him and Bijal Shah, who was, his partner, there's four of them. There was Nimish Patel, Bijal Shah, Adam Stephens, Finbarr O'Connell. And I told him that if he was stupid enough to sell my house in Turkey, I would see him in prison and I would have him for every penny he's worth. And he just sort of like, and the day actually that he left was the day before Christmas Eve, I believe, about 2 years ago. I didn't know he was leaving. I phoned the company up just to see if I could sort of give them some shit. And I spoke to him and he was extremely nervous. He was very, very unhappy to speak to me. I've recorded the call. One day I'll put it up. But he was laughing in a very, very creepy manner. Because I asked him just normal civil questions, because that's normally the way, it works best. I said to him, so he said, I'm leaving today. It's my last day, Mr. Cahill. I was like, oh, right, okay. So why are you leaving? And he went all scared. He didn't just say, because I'm getting more money, or because I've got bored of it, or, whatever, I've just got a new job. He said, I don't have to tell you. And then he started doing this horrible, creepy laugh. And at the same time, I don't know if you know the Jerry Sandusky case in America. There's that the most famous, basically, this guy was raping all the children in this school. He was a very famous coach in Penn State, Pennsylvania State. They had a very good, American football team. And when he was doing the interview, when he got first accused, and he was like, that's exactly how Adam Stephens was laughing. He was laughing exactly like that, very prolific paedophile. He sounded just the same, obviously without the American accent. But anyway, he's a very, very creepy character. If you look him up on the Smith Williamson's website, you wouldn't trust the guy as far as you could fucking throw him. If he walked into a field and the horse was in the field, the horse would leave the field, or or attack him or something. He's one of these kind of people. You wouldn't have to worry, whether you could trust your dog with him. The dog wouldn't trust him with the dog. You know what I mean? You can tell these people a mile away. They've got the screwed up faces. You couldn't trust them as far as you could throw them. But anyway, I'll leave it there. But Smith Williamson, bad news. They've got no answers. I've said things about them on the internet, on Scam Informer. I called it, I'll give you the name of the article. It was Birds of a Feather Flock Together. Smith and Williamson employ fraudsters. Birds of a feather flock together. Adam Stephens and Finbarr, because it got cut off because you can't have that long the title. The point is, why on earth would they let that be up on the web, on the internet, if they're like a quite leading consultancy in England? Why would they allow that to stay up on the internet? Why wouldn't they demand it be taken down? I was very open about it. I told them I was going to put it up. Why is that? I think there's only one sensible conclusion. Hopefully you come to the same conclusion that I do. So that was on Scam Exposure. But if you stick in Smith and Williamson with an asterisk, that was employ fraudsters, birds of a feather flock together, ? Adam Stephens and Finbarr. You'll find it. Hopefully you'll comment and maybe you can give me some information. As I said, my email is tomcahill@hotmail.com, but with a 0 instead of an O in Tom. Or my Skype is T0MCAHILL. Hopefully I'll speak to you soon.